TV plots never used to involve abortion, but a lot of times they get it wrong. Where someone is like, I'm taking Plan B, and someone's like, no, it's an abortion, and it's like, it is not. Yeah. It's not. It's an abortion the same way that taking a Tylenol is a lobotomy. You're listening to Hysteria, the podcast, brought to you by the letters D and C. So like we mentioned, Jessica just published her new book, Abortion, Our Bodies, Their Lies, and the Truths We Use to Win. This book is coming out at a vital time because, yes, we need those truths to win all the measures we have on the ballot next month. Jessica, welcome back to Hysteria. So happy to have you.
Thank you for having me back.
So you're an OG feminist blogger.
Yeah, I am.
I remember you from before I was even a second generation OG feminist blogger. Why did you decide to pivot your focus fully over to abortion?
It wasn't deliberate at first, to be honest. I had an existing Substack where I was writing, just general feminist columns. But I think like a lot of people, I was so mad when Roe was overturned and so distressed. And I had just sort of started tracking things for my own edification because I felt so overwhelmed by all of the news that was coming out. And so I was just sort of jotting things down and, sending it to people. And then by the first week or two, I realized, oh, this is a thing. This is actually a newsletter, in itself. So it was sort of by accident. And even when I first started, I was worried that maybe after a few months, I wouldn't have enough to write about every day. I was like, am I going to be able to keep this up? Are we going to have enough news? Are people going to still be covering this? And of course, now I can't keep up. Right. Mm-hmm. Like there's just so much happening every single day that I can't keep up. But that's part of the point. The point is to provide a little bit of order to the chaos and make sure people know exactly what's going on and what they should be paying closest attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and given the kind of, to use a little bit of a awkward metaphor, kind of a Lucy and the Chocolate Factory nature of the way that this bad news keeps coming out, how did you organize your thoughts into this book?
Yeah, it was actually really challenging because I knew that by the time the book came out, so much more was going to have happened. There's no way to sort of capture every single thing. And so I really tried to think about the book as capturing a particular moment in time and also talking about stories, talking about issues that I thought would be evergreen, like the way that Republicans are attacking democracy to ban abortion, right? Or the kind of language that they use to go after birth control, because some things are never going to change and you can sort of apply them to whatever new horrible thing is happening.
Despite the fact that a lot of things in your newsletter and in the book feel like negative, I think the overall vibe is one of kind of positivity and optimism. How do you take optimism from all the bad things that are happening?
I'm glad you feel that way. That was a worry about the book because there is so much horrible shit happening. It's hard not to feel depressed and downtrodden about it all. I think the thing that gives me a lot of hope and the thing I wanted to make sure to pass along in the book is just how many people care about this and are working so hard in every state, in every county. There are groups of activists who are on it, who are absolutely working their asses off to make sure that people can get the care that they need. And so I think seeing the way that the abortion rights movement and abortion rights supporters have come together has been pretty incredible. I'm also I like winning. And I'm a little bit petty. And so watching...
Same.
Yeah, like watching Republicans implode has been amazing. Thinking about ways we can make that happen more also it drives me. My pettiness drives me.
I mean, absolutely same. To me, it's sort of the feeling that I get when I have like a first aid book on my shelf where it's like, yeah, everything in this book is about like burns and cuts and what to do if your bone is sticking out of your arm, but also like it tells you what to do and it tells you where to go. So what are some of the truths that, in your opinion, are, as mentioned in the title, we need to use to win. And what are some things that you wish more people knew and would deploy in this fight?
That's a great question. There's so much. I guess I'll tell you the thing I'm thinking about most right now. I think the thing I'm thinking about most right now are ways that we can hold mainstream media accountable for reporting on this issue accurately, pushing back against sort of the both sides media nonsense that tends to come with covering abortion rights, whether it is a national paper, your local paper, like whatever it is, it all matters, and paying attention to the language that they're using when they're talking about this issue. The most recent thing has been Trump saying he would veto a national abortion ban, and Vance saying, I don't support a ban, I support a minimum national standard, even though those two are the same exact thing. I nearly had an aneurysm yesterday because CNN fact checked Tim Walz's statement that Donald Trump wants to ban abortion, because they said, well, Donald Trump said he doesn't want to ban abortion. It's so important that reporters who are doing this work, publications that are covering this issue, know what those language games are that Republicans are playing and are reporting on that as well, right? It's been over 2 years. They should be caught up.
Yeah.
At least on that level.
Yeah. And, it kind of bothers me in the conversation that nobody is asking candidates questions like, how did you arrive at 15 weeks? Why 15 weeks? What about 15 weeks?
Yeah.
Is it just a number that you're like, well, that's in between two other numbers? What is the medical basis for this? And I think that we find when people are needled about it, they end up just saying wild fanfic about how they think the female body works. I think you probably remember there was a lawmaker in Idaho that suggested women swallow cameras.
Yes. Yeah. That's how you can get your gynecological exam, is just swallow a camera, because of course your stomach leads directly to the vagina.
It's all one tube. Haven't you seen a commercial for those Dove Secrets? Those women are practically orgasmic when they eat little pieces of chocolate,
Oh my God.
It's all connected by one tube, Jessica.
They think we're like an earthworm. Just it is absolutely... It's infuriating that they are not asking those specific questions. The thing that I write about in the book, that something as simple as, you say you support birth control. What kind of birth control do you support? Do you support IUDs? Do you support emergency contraception? Right? Because one of the things that Republicans are doing, and I know you know this, but I feel like I always have to repeat it, is they're redefining certain kinds of birth control as abortions, so that they can say, with their sort of fingers crossed behind their back, of course I support birth control. I just want to ban abortion, aka, IUDs, emergency contraception, and depending on the group you're talking to, hormonal contraception. So it's just let's get to the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, and another thing that drives me kind of crazy, and we can move on to the news topics after this, but I think that your point about holding the media to account is absolutely right, and it drives me nuts personally when I see, TV plots never used to involve abortion. They never used to. I mean, it was on Maude, I think, in the 70s, and then they kind of, didn't talk about it at all, and they started to have it on pop culture, on large, widely consumed media more recently. But a lot of times they get it wrong, where someone is like, I'm taking Plan B, and someone's like, no, it's an abortion. And it's like, it is not. Yeah. It's not. It's an abortion the same way that taking a Tylenol is a lobotomy. It's...
No, it's true. Even just in terms of representation and who's getting abortions, and how it's always a tragic choice and not a normal part of someone's life, right? There's all sorts of weird things going on with representation of abortions in that way.
Yeah, so unfortunately, X / the artist formerly known as Twitter is now a dumpster fire. But reaching out whenever I see it, I feel like such a pedantic person. But every time a show does something where I'm like, you guys, you can't pretend that these things are the same. Anyway, it's one of my little bugaboos. Okay, let's talk about things that are big bugaboos.
Sure.
Florida, the state of Florida, right now on the cusp of a historic natural disaster. And what is the governor of the state of Florida doing? Not what he should be doing to protect citizens of Florida, he is focusing valuable state resources in part on fighting an abortion measure that is on the ballot. So abortion's on the ballot all over the country. But there is some chaos around the Fourth Amendment in Florida. Currently, the state has a 6-week abortion ban on the books. But this amendment, if people pass it by 60%, would protect the right to abortion in the state. Ron DeSantis has been sort of up to some fuckery around this. And Jessica, you've written about it. Can you talk a little bit about what Governor DeSantis has been doing?
It's quite a lot of fuckery. I think that's the exact right word. So the latest is that he has, his administration is threatening television stations with criminal charges if they don't pull ads for Amendment 4. They're saying that it violates some health nuisance law, a law that is actually generally used to regulate slaughterhouses and septic tanks. That is what they are using to go after television stations. And they're saying, oh, well, this ad isn't true. It puts women's health in danger by telling them that our abortion ban is really dangerous. And so they're infringing on free speech. But what's sort of happening in the background is that DeSantis has been using millions in taxpayer dollars to launch ads, radio ads, TV ads, a campaign of his own against Amendment 4. So he's using the power of state agencies' taxpayer dollars to oppose a citizen-led initiative, which is sort of unprecedented, and it's definitely illegal, though they had some, GOP judge let them get away with it. But it's really distressing to watch. But it's akin to what we have seen in every state where abortion has been on the ballot, that Republicans are just pulling out every single stop that they can to make sure that voters don't have a say, or to make sure that voters are as disinformed as possible, because they know that when voters have a direct say on abortion rights wins.
Mm-hmm. And Florida has kind of a history of passing citizen-led referendums, even though the threshold is high. The
threshold is high, yeah.
Yeah, it's 60%, which is much more than half, a supermajority. Mm-hmm. But they've restored the voting rights of felons. They've done things that you wouldn't necessarily think that a red state would do. And the last I've seen is that Amendment 4 is polling really well. How are you feeling about its chances of passing in Florida?
I was feeling really good about it. It has been polling really well. I haven't read the full article, but the New York Times came out with a piece today that shows some of the newer polls are not as positive, and that's likely in part because of this huge multi-million-dollar state-funded, state-led campaign against Amendment 4. So I am a bit worried. That said, the Amendment 4 folks are doing amazing. They are doing so much on the ground. They've been really, really reaching out across the aisle. They have been getting a lot of Republican voters to support the amendment, which they need because it is, a 60% threshold. So I'm going to finish reading that article, but I'm feeling a little less great than I was a couple of days ago because of these attacks from DeSantis. And also remember, I forgot to mention, people who supported Amendment 4 reported that police were coming to their door to question them about potential voter fraud. They opened up this voter fraud investigation into the people who signed the petition to get Amendment 4 on the ballot. So, on top of everything else, there's all of this voter intimidation that's happening.
Okay, I don't know a ton about the inner workings of the state of Florida politics. Never lived there before. Probably never will. But is there any way for advocates to push back against this? Are there any levers they can pull?
I mean, they've been suing, right? They've been bringing lawsuits. Unfortunately, with the last one about DeSantis using taxpayer dollars, they lost that one. I think they're sort of doing everything that they can, but I think one of the most important things that they're doing is letting people know what sort of fascist bullshit that he's up to. Just shining a light on it, I think, is really helpful. Voters don't like to be tricked. They don't like to be manipulated. And I think making sure that voters know all of the dirty tricks that Republicans are pulling is helpful.
And President Trump, who is a Florida voter, said he would be voting no on this amendment to protect abortion rights. Do you believe him?
I don't know that he cares. I think he'll do whatever he feels like doing, like in the moment, yes or no. You know, he has been really using this amendment as a cudgel, as a way to try to appear softened on the issue, right? Like first he said, maybe 6 weeks is too short. Maybe I will, vote yes. And so he's been doing this sort of game with, now Melania, just doing anything he can to try to appear more moderate than he actually is. I actually don't think he really cares very much one way or the other, but I do think that if he was elected, he would basically give the anti-abortion movement anything that they want.
Yeah, it is frustrating to watch him sort of act like he's trying to make a deal to buy a giant skyscraper.
Oh my God.
Yeah, 6 weeks, we can't go that low. Can we maybe do? Let's just it's not you. I've said this before, but these people give off the vibe that they got their science exams handed back face down.
Oh my God, 100%. They don't. I mean, that is like one of the most humiliating things I think about all of this is that the people who are making these laws, the people who are passing these policies, don't know anything. They could not pass like a remedial test about pregnancy, women's bodies. They do not know shit, and yet somehow we're supposed to trust them with whether or not we die of sepsis in a hospital room.
It's just beyond the pale to me too. Like, how are you writing medical protocol when you majored in poli-sci? Like, sorry, it's fine, be a politician, but like maybe politicians shouldn't be writing medical laws. We're gonna talk about Melania in a second, but before we move on to that, I want to talk a little bit about what Vote Save America is doing for hurricane relief, because that is top of mind today. Well, Governor DeSantis is focusing on manipulating the election and keeping Floridians from accessing reproductive rights. Hurricane Milton is fast approaching his state less than 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene wreaked havoc in communities in Georgia, western North Carolina, South Carolina, eastern Tennessee, Virginia, and Florida. Thousands are unhoused and over 200 are confirmed dead. It will be days before the full scope of the damage is known, and it will take time to reach all those who need help. Vote Save America Action and Crooked Ideas have partnered to raise money to support disaster relief efforts in states throughout the Southeast who have been impacted by Hurricane Helene. To donate, go to votesaveamerica.com/relief. We have already raised a really wonderful, impressive amount of money, but every little bit helps. So if you can help at all, votesaveamerica.com/relief. Okay, let's move on to another alleged Florida voter, Melania Trump. Do you think she lives in Florida? I'm just gonna.
I actually don't know. Is she in New York now? I have no idea.
She seems like somebody who can't be around bugs, And I think
I can see that.
Yeah, with Florida, there's bugs. There's bugs,
Big bugs.
Big bugs. And I just can't see her enjoying that. And also, the hair and makeup situation and that humidity
That's true. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's gnarly.
Yeah, it's not great. But, who knows? She's allegedly a Floridian, and so that's the segue. Last week, we heard an unexpected voice on the topic of abortion. First Lady Melania Trump, she posted an unsettling video to X where she sort of looked like an alien princess, being beamed down in a sort of Metropolis update,
with the half shadow on her face.
It was very person who flunked out of film school in the Eastern Bloc. She said in the video, without a doubt, there is no room for compromise when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth, individual freedom. She apparently doubled down on her stance in her memoir, Melania, released this week, which she obviously didn't write. She didn't write it. Okay, where was all this energy when she was First Lady? She told, I guess maybe ripping up the Rose Garden. She told Fox News on Sunday that Donald lets her believe in abortion rights and has always been aware of her stance. Whatever you say, Melania. Jessica, you called some bullshit on this. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a whole load of bullshit. Listen, I have no idea. Maybe she is pro-choice. I tend to think that she doesn't really care one way or another like Trump does. But obviously the timing of this is not a coincidence, right? Trump is down 21 points with women voters. Every time something sort of happens with abortion rights or abortion rights is in the news, like, for example, Georgia's abortion ban killing 2 women at least that we know about. He sort of does something like says he's going to cover IVF or he's going to veto a federal ban. And now they sort of have dispatched Melania to change the conversation. And it's worked. You know, I write about abortion every day in my newsletter. And for the past few days, that has absolutely dominated all of the abortion news is Melania. And it's so craven. It's so cynical. And I wrote this and I really think it's true. Like, she is hawking a book on the backs of dead women, a $40 book, $250 if you want it signed. Like, that's what she's doing. At the end of that really disturbing video, there's a little image of her book and a prompt to buy it. You laugh at it because it is so absurd. It is so ridiculous, but it also makes me so angry that they are co-opting women's suffering and deaths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it also came out in the news that she asked CNN for $250,000
Yes.
to do an interview promoting her book.
Yep.
That's pretty brazen. Like, you wrote, Jessica, that Melania isn't pro-choice, she's pro-Melania.
Yeah.
Do you think she's gonna, this is gonna be a bestseller? Are there gonna be super PACs buying up copies of this book? Like,
oh yeah, like, it's going to be a bestseller. It'll have the little thing on at the Times, the little footnote. It's like they definitely cheated to get this on the bestseller list. I wouldn't be surprised if it sells really well, right? And I'm sure this is going to help her in some way. It is horrific and bizarre.
But do people who like Melania Trump read?
No, but there's a lot of pictures. If you pay extra, you get more pictures.
Oh,
So.
okay. I mean, I think that you're right. It'll probably get the little cheater stamp on the New York Times book bestseller ranking. But I don't know. I'm thinking about this. I'm not going to read it because I have a limited number of hours on this earth. But I just keep thinking, like, who is this for? Like, who is this book for? Like, does Melania want to be what is she? I know she always wanted to be on the cover of Vogue. She never got to be on the cover of Vogue. Like, she every part of society that she wanted to be a part of kind of like headed her off at the pass. And so is kind of Michelle Obama-ing herself by making a book. Like, is that her trying to pretend like she is of the same stature as even Laura Bush? Who's going to read this who isn't being forced to by a mean editor who wants them to shred it?
No, I think you're right. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that there's like Melania stans out there, right? Who are going to be very excited about this. And maybe she's thinking about some sort of like speaking tour after the election. Who knows what she has planned for sort of after, whatever that after looks like.
Did you see that interview that she did with, I don't know who she did it with, where she was like, as a working mom, she did a Fox News interview and there's some like B-roll of her sitting behind a golden desk and like Barron driving a tiny like Mercedes, like a child-sized Mercedes through her office. And she talks about how she's a working mom.
A working mom who has a full-time staff of, a dozen people, however many it is.
I'm sorry.
What is she working at?
I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, in this day and age, if you have not breastfed on a Zoom meeting, I think that it's probably difficult to call yourself a work or whatever. Breastfed on a conference call. It's like, are you? You've got a staff. All right, let's move on from Melania, the new Gloria Steinem or whatever. I don't know. And let's talk about what's happening in Nebraska. Jessica, you talk a lot about the kind of language games that anti-freedom, anti-abortion people play. And as a result of those language games, there are now 2 dueling abortion measures on the ballot in Nebraska. The law currently prohibits abortion after 12 weeks with exceptions for medical emergencies, sexual assault, and incest. And as you and I both know, those things they're not really exceptions.
They're not real. Yeah.
One amendment known as Protect Women and Children would codify that law, while the other amendment called Protect the Right to Abortion would effectively reverse it. This is a confusing and unusual situation for voters. Jessica, how did we get here?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a coincidence that those names sound so similar, right? Essentially, the Abortion Rights Amendment came first. They're doing what a lot of people are doing across the country. And because Republicans know that abortion rights ballot measures have been so successful, that voters want abortion rights to be restored, they decided that instead of doing sort of like their normal opposition campaign, they were going to launch a ballot measure of their own, pick a similar sounding name, frame it as pro-choice. That's what they've done. They had their petitioners go out and say, have you signed the pro-choice petition yet? Have you signed the petition to protect abortion rights? And hopefully trick voters into enshrining the state's 12-week ban into the state constitution. And to, the fact that they're on the ballot at all shows that they have been successful. And there were hundreds of people, that complained in Nebraska to the Secretary of State's office that they were tricked into signing this petition, that they wanted to switch their signatures over. And so yeah, they're hoping that they can trick enough voters. And we saw something similar happen. Republicans in Arizona were considering doing the same thing. There was like this strategy document that was leaked where they were going to propose an anti-abortion amendment. But the names that they had picked out for it were things like the Arizona Abortion Protection Act, the Arizona Reproductive Rights Act, right? Like very, very transparent, just trying to target pro-choice voters into stripping away their own rights. And so it's just so incredibly shady, but it does also give me a little bit of hope that they are losing so badly on this issue that the only way they think that they can win is by pretending to be pro-choice.
Right. And giving them confused. Yeah, that's exactly the case. I don't know if they can, though. I feel like there's so many people paying attention now. I mean, like, you're on TikTok. I see your videos come through my feed all the time because I've built an FYP brick by brick. It seems like a lot of people are engaging with your content. A lot of people are engaging with pro-choice content. Do you think that we're kind of at the point now where the horse is out of the barn and enough young people know, enough voters know how these tricks work that maybe they won't work anymore?
I hope so. I think that certainly more know than they did a year ago, right? Like, I do think that we're seeing a lot more engagement, a lot more understanding and knowledge. But I think, again, to like come back to mainstream media outlets, like when you have places like the Times or the Washington Post, like putting ban and scare quotes or not giving like the full context of what's going on, not calling out these dirty tricks, then I worry, right? Like, I am so glad that people engage with my TikTok. I'm so glad that people read the newsletter, but I'm independent feminist journalist on Substack, right? Like, we need the big guys to be covering this in a major way as well, and not just like in an ancillary here's the lady news of the day type of way, but like these should be front page stories every single day.
What's the biggest misapprehension, not just from the media, but from like people that you're seeing? Like, because I feel like in this debate there's also like dis and misinfo that's been seeded. What dis and misinfo are you seeing kind of taking off?
Unfortunately, the one that you would think is so obviously false but somehow is gaining traction is the post-birth abortion thing. And the abortion up until birth and post-birth abortion, you would be surprised how many people I've seen in comments elsewhere, and I've spoken to a couple of pollsters who are seeing like this rise as well, where they'll say, oh yeah, in California, you can kill a baby up to 6 days after birth. Like, that's a thing. Swear to God, people like are buying it. And so I really worry about that, like that sort of like extremism piece of it. On a more normal level, though still completely dishonest, Trump's back to the states message is working with voters, and particularly in battleground states with Republican women. They are buying into this lie that he's giving it back to the states. It's up to the will of the people. Voters will get to choose, right? He's done this very smart thing of giving Republican women the impression that they're going to have a choice when they don't, so that they can have this excuse to vote for him. Yeah, so that I definitely worry about.
I think that some women are just looking for an excuse or permission to vote for Trump. Not
100%.
like they're just like, ugh, they can't do it yet, but they just say the right thing and then that'll unlock my vote. Do you think that there are a lot of those people out there? I mean, we're just going off vibes at this point.
Yeah, it is all vibes. I mean, I hope not, but I do worry about it. I do think that that's exactly right, that there are a lot of Republican women who are just looking for an excuse, and he is giving it to them when he says he would veto a national ban, which we know is not true. When he says he's just trying to protect babies from being murdered after birth, right? Like, I'm concerned that there might be enough of them. Like, listen, I'm holding out hope. I still feel good. But just watching this sort of disinformation take hold, it's really troubling. I do think that, if we lose, I think it will be in large part because of that spread of disinformation and, us not doing a good enough job of dismantling it.
Well, on that note, that is all the time we have today with Jessica Valenti. You can read her newsletter. You should be reading her newsletter, Abortion Every Day. It's on Substack. And her new book, her 8th book, Abortion, Our Bodies, Their Lies, and the Truths We Use to Win, is available wherever you get better books.